Hey guys, welcome back. Joe here again, ScaleFreak.com, coming to bring you the install and the quickie review on the, you see them in there? The RC4WD Portal Axles, available for the SCX10 axles. So, portals for the SCX10 axles. Now, basically, this is a really neat addition you can get to your scale rig to, I guess, make it a little less scale. Portal axles are scale if you're a serious off-roader. I did a lot of research on these bad boys online just to see exactly what condition you would use them for or what situation you use them for, and it seems like it's some pretty serious off-road machines. And guys, since the F-Bomb here is meant to be a pretty serious off-road machine, I thought, what better part than to get for it? So guys, take a look at the video, take a look at how they're built, what my thoughts are, and what the end product looks like. Thanks, guys. As always, first, let's start with the packaging of the products. So here we go. We've got the fronts, the rears, and of course the linkage set. First, the linkage set is the RC4WD steering link for the AX front portal axles, Scorpion SCX10, RC4WD part number Z-S1241. Here we have the RC4WD portal front axle for AX10 axles, Scorpion SCX10, RC4WD part number Z-A0089. And then, of course, the rears, portal axles, SCX or AX10, Scorpion SCX10, RC4WD part number Z-A0019. I've got the part numbers and links down below as well if you guys want to go ahead and find that. So going through the systems itself, of course, as always, the packaging is very easy. Open that bad boy up. First, we'll start with the links. Each package individually wrapped, so in a bag inside of a bag, and you can see in there, there's more bags. So all the screws, all the links, everything are all in here. Again, more bags. Metal links, so that's good. Go through here. I'm just going to set this stuff aside on the cow RC mats. These things I like to keep handy because I'm going to lose screws eventually. So you get new ball ends. This is good because if you've been using your rig for as long as I have, you tend to start to wear stuff out. So, of course, throwing those in there. And then, of course, all the screw hardware, stuff like that you need to put it together as well. It's all right here. So I'm going to set that off to the side, get rid of these packages here. Of course, now we'll take a look at the fronts. Rip open the packaging. Now in here, the front and rear also come with instructions, which is good because this is a different kind of system that I'm not used to. So I understand the concept behind it. I just want to make sure that I do everything correctly when I do the install. So as you go through here, instructions, well, very simple. It's all picture-based. I can't see this being a concern with getting the install put on. So again, very simple on how exactly I'm going to do it. Now looking through here, it appears... Give me 1 second here. You know what? I'm going to leave my appears for when I finally get everything put together. I just want to make sure that I've got the right idea before I put it all together again. So that's the front, of course, step-by-step instructions on how you're going to get it done, and, of course, what the finished product is going to look like. In here, there's a silica packs. Remember, guys, these aren't snack food. Do not eat these things. And if you've got pets, please make sure you put them away. I'm going to use the bigger one for this because I'm going to be the front and rear. So, of course, you do have the replacements for the front. In the front, you know, all the hardware and stuff like that is going to get set up here. And of course, this is great because I've actually ordered some parts in the past that did not come with the correct bearings. These ones here, all the bearings and new drive pins. So I've been using now the system that's in this rig for a very long time. I could definitely use some new drive pins. And you see through here, got all the gearing and stuff like that. All the bearings, that's excellent. So that is for the front setup there. Now, of course, here are the actual portal pieces themselves. So these guys here, I'm obviously going to open these things up. This is where all the gearing is going to go. And basically, that's how everything is going to go put back together again. So, and then let's move on to the rear. Let's put all this stuff out of the way. Let's move on to the rear real quick. Yikes. So again, instructions for the rear, step by step on exactly how you're going to get it done. Of course, it's much simpler for the rear because it doesn't have to turn. So it's all on here exactly how the whole system is going to fit on there. Again, bags inside of bags, inside of bags. So you can see here the system is a little bit different, right? Because of course this is going to also work as your lockout. It's going to fit onto the end of your axle like that. Whereas of course this thing here is a little bit different because this is going to have to turn, go onto the axle. And then see you've got this guy here as well for the rear. Here's all the rear parts. Set those up here. And then same idea. New drive shafts for the system. Of course, these go to your diff. These go to your wheels. And then all the bearings and gears, of course, installed. So this is going to take me a few minutes to get my truck opened up. Of course, we all know how we're removing the stock parts. Now, in my rig, if you guys have seen the videos in the past, the F-Bomb is using the GCM last lockers. So I'm going to have to tear apart my entire axle to get everything reset. Not something you necessarily have to watch, but this is going to take me a few minutes to get this done. So 1 second, guys. Before I get too deep into this project, I do want to answer a question that was asked very early in the announcement that I was going to be putting these things on, and that was, how much wider is it going to make the rig itself? So I do want to make some measurements now. So this is the rear axle. I've got both the axles out of the truck. It's just going to make it a lot easier to tear them apart to get everything put back together. So on the rear axle, from the end of the lockout to the end of the lockout, we're looking at roughly 7 inches. From end of stub to end of stub, we're looking at about roughly 8.5. So that gives us an idea. So 7, and then, again, I can't really get too close because the pumpkin's there. We're looking at about 8.5 if I eyeball it. On the front end, from the end of the knuckle to end of knuckle, we're looking at just a titch over 7, so about the same. Remember, guys, I'm using the STRC lockouts and hubs on here right now, and then from end of stub to end of stub, this is using the Axial CVDs. We're looking again at about, again, eyeballing it 8.5. So we're looking at about the same width. So we'll say 7, just a little over 7, and then 8.5 on the end of both. So let's see how this pans out at the end as to how much wider it's actually going to make it. Now, to build a rear portal, got all the parts laid out here. It's actually not. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but it's also not the hardest thing in the world. So first, I'll show you. You can see the difference between the two axles once I got them pulled apart. A bit of a size difference going on there. These are the stock ones, so they're gone. Now, in building this, again, follow the instructions is my key thing. And what I like to do, there's going to be a lot of these little pins. What I really love to do, because you're going to be using your hands a lot with this, is to make sure that you have some good grease around. I use the Cow RC Udder Butter to slather it. Basically what I do is, like say for example this, I want to put this all in place. So to build it, I'm taking some of the grease and I'm putting it in the pinhole. Reason being is because once you jam that pin in there and it's all greased up, it's less likely to fall out. So that's kind of one of my tips I like to give, just to make sure stuff isn't falling off. Now, I mean, even if you want to keep this stuff like that, put it all over, and that will actually help keep bearings in place as well. Because now all of a sudden you slap a bearing on here, it's less likely to fall itself off. So big tip on that one. Of course, even still, same with this. So the inside of this guy here, I know a bearing's going in there. I know I want that bearing to stay there once it goes in there. So I will do that and slap the correct bearing in. That's still not the correct bearing. Slap the right bearing in, and it will stay in place. Oi. Okay, where did it go? There it is. And then once you got that in place, it will stay put for you. So if you do that, it doesn't fall out. Makes it a lot easier in the long run. So for this guy here, of course, you've got kind of the main axle shaft. One of the gears is going on this bad boy here. Now make sure that that guy's lined up all nice. Otherwise it will kind of, I mean, I know we're not threading it, but it's almost like it's a cross thread. And I'm telling you now, guys, it's a completely massive pain in the ass if that goes in the wrong direction. And of course, we're going to slap a bearing on the other end of this here. Now, what's going to happen is when this thing all goes together, of course, this is going to be stuck in that bearing right there, so we don't necessarily need to have it on the end of that shaft right now. I actually like to keep it in here for safekeeping. And then, of course, there's that little stub shaft as well. So the stub shaft, same idea, right? We're throwing a bearing on the inside of this bad boy here. Well, hold on. A little bit of this on there because I'm going to have to put one of those cross pins in there. So throw the bearing Only problem with working with this much grease is that you start to get slippery. So throw the bearing on there, and of course put in that little cross pin just to keep it steady. And then now, of course, the gear is going to go on there as well. So guys, just make sure this thing snaps on there nice. So it's on there just like that. And then, of course, we are throwing a bearing on the end of this as well. So just like that to close it up. Now, this bad boy here is actually going to go, let's see, one more bearing here. It's actually this little guy right here. And then, of course, one more bearing is going to go on the end of here as well, because this piece here is going to go inside this. So just down like that, and it's all plugged in. So that is going to be the part that actually goes to your rim. And of course, this is going to be the part that's going to go to the axle itself. So I've kind of got all those bearings stuck on there. Now, one of the things, again, that I also like to do, since I'm at this stage right now, is make sure I've got this thing completely gooped up with udder butter. I mean, I don't plan on pulling these things apart anytime soon, so make a mess of it, especially considering this stuff is waterproof. Go nuts. Hell, if you're feeling frisky, dip the whole thing right in there. Get that done. Now, of course, at this point, you're going to be, let me see here, drop this through here. The reason being is because this gear is actually smaller than the outside of this little mechanism is here. So if you ever pull the axle shaft out, the axle shaft will come, but the gear will not. So now you can see how that's been put together. And of course, the whole inside of this thing is all slathered up with udder butter. Now, like I said, you can pull this out. It will come out with the pin and with the bearing, but the gear will stay inside. So you just want to make sure that that thing's pre-greased before you lock it up. Now, of course, the casing itself is held closed with 6 of these little 1.5 screws. And of course, guys, I always recommend, since we are doing metal on metal, and because you don't normally have a bunch of these little tiny screws laying around, you're going to want to use some Loctite to put those things back in there. Now, this part now, because of course I did use so much grease, is a wee tad bit slimy. So I got to be very careful picking it up and holding it. And I'm just going to put these screws in to be hand tight just enough so that I can get the case lined up. And then once I get all 6 screws in, I will lock them down. Now, it is a 1.5, so you don't need to completely hand reef these suckers down, because the 1.5 bit or the 1.5 screws will circle out. It's just the way that it is. And of course, I've mentioned it in previous videos, make sure when you're doing a build or any work really, make sure you've got a good quality wrench, because if your wrench starts to go or the head tip starts to go, then you're going to start circling out screws like crazy, and that is a massive, massive pain in the ass. You start wondering, why are all my screws screwing out or stripping out? It's actually your bit, it's not your screws itself. So just one second here, I'll get the last one in. Of course, each one does get locked tight. I will also remind you, when you're working over a pit mat, make sure you work over the pit mat. I've already had to search for a couple screws because when I'm doing filming, I tend to stand back. When you're working over something like a Cow RC magnetic pit mat, let the pit mat do the finding for you. Even if you have to pick the mat up or one of these little mats up and put it on the ground so it'll find the screw when it hits the floor. So, of course, I've got all those in there. Just give me 1 second to finish the job on each screw. There's 3, 4, 5, and 6. So now that is what the unit actually looks like for the rear once it is together. And of course, flows nice. And then if we were to put this axle back together right now, it would go on there just like that. So that's how it fits on. It's pretty neat, eh? I mean, you can see how much of a drop it's going to give that piece of the axle. So there is a bit of a drop. Now, these are clocked a little bit as well because they're expecting this axle to have a little bit of a rake on it once it's back reinstalled again. So it will center it out real nice for you. So guys, give me a second. It's going to take me a minute to get everything reinstalled with this bad boy here. When you are using a last locker, there is a little moderate level of adjustment. You guys can go ahead and take a back look at my video on how that's done as well. With the front axle all pulled apart, you can see I've already got everything out of the GCM last locker. Here's a bit of a size difference, right? So here is now remember guys, these are the Axial CVD systems that you can get from Axial. You can see there is not much of a size difference. If I hold this up here, a little tiny bit, just a tiny bit of a size difference, but, well, actually, I guess you want to keep in mind that this would normally have, where did I put it? This guy on the end of here as well. So there will be, I guess, a bit of a size difference when it's all said and done, but the main stub shaft is not. Now, the build of these other sets are almost exactly the same as the front, or sorry, as the rear. So I'm just going to breeze through that really quick. I guess the biggest difference is that when you, instead of having that straight shaft on the rear, you are going to have a CVD. And the CVD is going to go, of course, it will end up hanging out of here like this, is exactly how that will be done. Now, the key thing to remember is you will be reusing your stock knuckles, whether you have a Vanquish knuckle, whether you have a STRC knuckle, a stock axial knuckle, whatever it is, you will be using your stock knuckles on here, so it will end up looking exactly like that, except for now it will be on the front end of the rig. So this is going to take me a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and get this part of the kit all built and set in. Hold on. One difference in the front compared to the rear that I needed to note is exactly how you load this little bad boy in. So remember when we were talking about the front, how the front would get, the rear would just get it put in, you know, because we would do the bearing on both ends. Just rewind if you have to see it. But it's going to be a little bit different for the front because remember we are using that CVD setup. So for this one here, basically press the bearing into the outside piece, and then for this part, you're actually going to stick the CVD portion in from the outside, and then of course a little bit of grease on here just to hold the pin, and then of course the pin goes in here and then the gear goes on. So it's a little bit different from how we did it on the rear of the rig, but in the end it all winds up being the same thing. It's just it loads in from the outside instead of going from this way here. And of course once you get that stuff set up, just slather the sucker down. No need to be sparing on it. Make sure it's lined up correctly. I already have the bearings pre-seated into other parts, and slap it on together, just like that, just like the other pieces. So a couple minutes, I'm going to get all these screws back in, and I'm going to show you how all the rest of the stuff mounts together. Well, I have the Axial and the RC4WD CVDs apart, I do want to show you something. This is the stock pin that you will find in the Axial CVD system. Very, very tiny pin. This is the stock pin that you will find in the CVD system for RC4WD. So you can see how much bigger, like width-wise, the RC4WD pin is, which means you're much less likely to wear out or break that pin. So I just wanted to show you guys that comparison between the two before I put it all back together again. Now, of course, in order to get all this stuff, you don't normally have to take these pieces apart in order to install everything correctly. But again, I was using the GCM last locker, so I had to pull it apart in order to align it correctly. When you're putting stuff back together again, why not use a little bit of grease in there as well? Hold stuff in nice, keeps it clean. If you ever have to pull it apart on the trail, it's less likely for stuff just to completely fall out. And of course, the CVD system is very simple. You put in the barrel, you put on the end, you throw in the cross pin, and then as soon as that's aligned there, always a technical difficulty somewhere, right? So as soon as you get that aligned in there, and then you can go ahead and throw the retainer on again. So I'm going to fight with this for a second because I'm always fighting with these things, especially when I'm on camera. But you can see what it looks like in the end. You just throw the sleeve retainer back on again, and next it'll be time to install the knuckles again. With these portals, you do need to use your stock knuckles, whatever you had on your truck before. I had the Team STRC on there, and I mean, they still work for me. I've had these things for years. I will be upgrading these shortly to a high steer setup, depending on, of course, exactly how they're going to fit with this rig. I want to make sure that I'm going to be able to clear this pumpkin with this lower setup here. Now, a couple things about this. Make sure your bearings are good. You're reusing older parts, so just make sure that your bearings are rock and roll before you put them back on. In this case, no problem. Now, one thing, again, very important to remember is when you are pulling these things apart, you want to make sure that you do not lose these little hi-hats. I've lost many. I actually keep spares. But of course, as another tip, like I said before, I put a little bit of grease inside the inside holes of this guy here, of the knuckle, so that when I put the hi-hat in, it is not going to try to sneak its way out. So just like there. Now, of course, don't over-grease it because you don't want to do what I just did, which is absolutely fill the hi-hat full of grease. There, I cleaned it out. Now, this, when you're lining it back up, of course, you want to make sure you put it on the correct direction. It goes towards the front of the axle, where the steering linkage is, not the back. And, of course, it just slides on just like so. And, of course, because these things are made to stick a stock setup, shouldn't be difficult to put it back on there. Now, the system here, now, I do want to stress this. If you are using a stock, if you're using a stock knuckle, it will probably be plastic, which means that your stock C-hub may also have been plastic. In this situation, you want to be very mindful of that because the RC4WD Portal hub is threaded. So if you're using the plastic screw that would be in your stock plastic setup, it's not going to thread correctly. But if you're using a metal setup, you'll have no problem because you'll already be using a machine screw. And of course, for this one here, we are using Loctite again because we don't want it to come out in the trail. If these screws come out in the trail, you know work, you know more, and that ends your day. So of course, you can crank these ones down a little bit. You don't want them to slide out. Because we have those top hats on there, it will keep them from pressing down onto the hub itself. But just make sure, just for the fun of it, that nothing's hanging up. You want to make sure you're getting a nice, smooth turn on it so it's not going to overwork your servo. And of course, from here on in, once you get both of these bad boys on there, the next step, of course, is to put your steering linkage back on, and then, of course, get everything back on the truck, because it doesn't do you any good when it's sitting here. So let me get the steering linkage set up, and I'll be right back. Steering linkages are always actually quite easy as long as you know the exact correct way to do it. That's the trick, is to know the best way to get a steering linkage put together. Now, one thing that a lot of people may have missed when looking in their manuals is the fact that when they send you linkage setups and they'll give you like this great big grub screw, in the end of the grub screws, there actually is a 1.5 hex. So bang, just like that, you can get it on there. Now, the reason why that's handy is because when you're threading it into this bad boy here, look how easy that is. Of course, it's going to be easy to get into the metal itself, but this makes it so much easier to get into the plastic. Now, I never crank it all the way down in the plastic on the first shot because, of course, the first time you're threading this thing on there, you really are creating a lot of heat friction, and you're making the plastic very, very pliable. So I put it down a little bit. Those aren't done yet. So, of course, I'm going to go through here, do all 4 of them, and then from there, I will finish the last little bit depending on exactly how much adjustment it needs. Just to sink it in as far as you can. Of course, in the metal, it's not going to pull out of the thread, so you want to make sure that you've got as much meat in the plastic as you can, but you don't want to crank it down or strip it out because, of course, metal on plastic, the metal will win, and it will just tear it apart. So once you get it into place, you'll feel as it's getting deep down in there, you figure out exactly how far you want to go. You may need to do some alternate adjustment as well just to make sure that the links are correct as far as where they want to be in alignment with the bars. So you don't want to crank it completely down, and you really don't want to crank it down far enough that you actually push it through the eye itself. Now, of course, because this is metal going into metal, we're going back with some thread lock again, and literally just that. That's all we're doing. Bang. There's one there. And there is one there. Now, of course, this is the front steering link, so we want to make sure they line up. So crank it as much as you can by hand. Eyeball it. That looks pretty straight. Maybe a little more. There we go. So I'm going to make it just like that. And, of course, the other link, where did I put it? There it is. The other link itself will be going from the servo, which is on a vertical to the top of the arm, which is a horizontal. So you want to make sure that you actually set it up like this. So one's going to be this, whatever, just put it on. And then the other one is going to be on an angle. Or see like that. So one faces you, where one is this way, one is that way. Because of course, this is going to go on like that, this is going to go on like that, and it's got to meet the servo sideways up here. And of course, it does give you that extra screw on there to be able to go through and put it through here. They are expecting you to have at least some of your hardware left over from your previous install, so use that as well. Give me 1 second, no need to show you how exactly this goes back on there. I'm going to get the link installed, and I'm going to get the servo put back on and put these things back on the truck. Okay, with all the links and the steering link reinstalled and ready to go, I've got the camera down about as level as I can get it to the table. I want to show you kind of one of the misconceptions that they had from the pictures on the RC4WD website. Now, on the RC4WD website, it kind of showed that this link, the bottom steering link, was going to be really far down on the pumpkin itself. Now, yes, it is a little farther than I would have expected, off the build, but whatever, it's still got clearance before the bottom of the pumpkin. Now, how much clearance did these things actually add to the rig? Well, look, this thing's sitting flat on the bottom screws of the knuckles, and there's still room underneath the pumpkin. So you've gotten that much more space on the front. Now, I did try to adjust it to see if I could put the link from the bottom up to the top. And while technically, yes, you can, it actually doesn't interfere with the center. Let's move this here. It doesn't interfere with the center of the pumpkin here. What it will do, though, is you have to adjust and make a custom link for this, because when you raise this link significantly, it starts to change the geometry to the servo horn itself. So I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to send this front axle off to Doug up at Rock Beach Customs and have him make me a set of custom links for this thing, so that I can actually move all this up to the top and get even that much more clearance. So that's the front. Now, on the back, you'll see, because it doesn't have the bottom of the knuckles, this thing here, they are flat level to be able to do the bottom of the portals, the bottom of the axle, and there. It doesn't teeter. They are all flat on the ground, so that's how much extra you're getting on the back as well. So give me 1 second. I just want to throw all the tires on and put the shell on so you can actually kind of see what the F-Bomb looks like with the portals on it. Everything back together again. You can see that this thing has been lifted a little bit. Holy cow. With a full setup, I got to put a battery in this thing just to kind of weigh it down a little bit. I'll put it in the back so it'll get a little bit different. But as you can see here, there is quite a bit extra height once the wheels are on. That actually means height everywhere, right? So even full slam down on my King suspension 100 millimeter, I still have tons of room. If I want to do a full articulation on one side, I am not touching the bed side. And of course, on the front, same idea, just rubbing the fender. That's nothing a little trim can't fix, but for the most part. Now you can see here on the front end, because they do clock a little bit forward, you'll see it actually moved my tire a little tiny bit forward, which actually made my wheelbase a millimeter or so longer, which I'm okay with. I like the long wheelbase on this rig. So, wow. This thing definitely, I wanted beast mode. This thing is very beast mode. I absolutely love this with these things on there. And of course, you do get even more clearance between the ground and the pumpkin. Let me see if I can measure this real quick. Kind of put this close to the edge of the desk. It looks now like ground clearance with my pit bull tires. I have 2 inches from the bottom of the pumpkin. Yeah, 2 inches from the bottom of the pumpkin to the ground. And to the steering linkage, 2 1/4. So 2 1/4, 2 inches from the center of the axle to the ground, 2 1/4 to the furthest part down of the steering linkage to the ground. And then of course on the back, kind of spin that bad boy around. Let's see if I get the same. Should be the same, right? Yeah, same. Absolutely amazing. So I'm in love with this, guys. I'm in love with these things. I can't wait to get them out on the rocks to see how they do as far as giving me a little bit of extra clearance. Yes, this will put a little bit more weight up top, but that's fine because I mount all my weight directly to the chassis. The rest of this is just scale option, stuff like that. and my long suspension helps me with that anyway. So guys, that's it for the install of the portals. I hope you guys learned something from this and maybe take a look at the RC4WD website. Consider maybe getting yourself a set. These things are pretty nice. I can't wait to try them out. As always, guys, please remember just to click on the like button. Don't forget to hit on the subscribe button that's up at the top. And, you know, throw some comments down below what you think about these parts, what you think about the install. Have you used portals before? This isn't the first truck that these things have been available on. So, you know, what rig have you used portals on, and what do you think of them? And of course, guys, share this throughout your community. If you know anybody in the RC community that would like to see maybe more of what the portal does or what the install is, just share the video around. Appreciate it a whole ton. So, guys, thank you very much again for watching. Have yourself a great night.